Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this wonderful Friday morning. I am going to continue reading a little bit more of The Law of One. So last we left off, we were at about book 1, session 16. I think we got about 6 chapters from session 10. So from what I can tell, session 17 looks a little bit longer. So we'll see how far we actually get today. But I've got my coffee, I've got banana, and I've got some breakfast bars. So we are all set for the morning reading. If you have any questions, anything along the way, feel free to chime in and ask them. I'll do my best to answer what I can. And otherwise, stick around for the ride, enjoy the music, and let's get into reading the rest of The Law of One. So the music I've chosen appropriately for this reading today is Age of Mythology, one of my favorite video games. Turn this down just a bit. I never know what the audio is. If anyone wants to tell me how good the audio is or if I need to adjust something, I really would appreciate that. But I've tried and figured it out as best I can when I look at my past streams, but I haven't been able to actually kind of manipulate it to a point where I'm happy with it and I don't receive any background noise. But anyway, with that being said, let's move right into Law of One. So we're going to switch over now. Perfect. All right. So, here we are. Law of One, Book 1, Session 17, February 3rd, 1981. I am Ra. I greet you in the love and light of the infinite Creator. And this I'll minimize just a bit. question us that we may recalculate. concerns one of the arrivals of both the Orion group into your planetary sphere of influence and the corresponding arrival of emissaries of the Confederation. The game dates actually 600 years ago. The years from the Orion entry to the Confederation. This is incorrect. Recalculation indicates 3600. Thank you very much. I'd like to say again, it's a great honor and privilege to be here. I would like to reiterate that some of my questions may seem a little bit complex and contrarian as just to gain a foothold in we are now in the fourth density. The effects of the fourth density increase in the next 30 years. So 1981, so 30 years from 2000. We see more changes in our environment. Affecting the fourth density of the vibrational spectrum. Your time-space continuum, spiral, planetary sphere, and your what we would call galaxy, what you call star, into this vibration. This will cause the planetary sphere itself to electromagnetically realign its vortices of reception of the instreaming of cosmic forces expressing themselves as vibrational webs so that the Earth thus be fourth density magnetized, as you may call it. This is going to occur with some inconvenience, as we have said before, due to the energies of thought forms of your people which disturb the orderly constructs of energy patterns within the Earth, spirals of energy which increase entropy and unusable heat. This will cause your planetary sphere to have some ruptures in its outer garment while making itself appropriately magnetized for fourth density. This is the planetary adjustment. You will find a sharp increase in the number of people, as you call, mind-body-spirit complexes, whose vibrational potentials include the potential for fourth vibrational distortions. Thus, there will be, shall we say, a new breed. These are those incarnating for fourth density work. There will also be a sharp increase in the short run of negatively oriented or polarized mind-body-spirit complexes and social complexes, due to the polarizing conditions of the sharp delineation between fourth density characteristics and third density self-service orientation. Those who remain in fourth density upon this plane will be of the so-called positive orientation. Many will come from elsewhere, for it would appear that with all the best efforts of the Confederation, which include those from your peoples, inner planes, inner civilizations, and those from other dimensions, the harvest will still be much less than this planetary sphere is capable of comfortably supporting in service. Is it possible, by the use of some technique or other, to help an entity reach the fourth density in the last days? I am wrong. It is impossible to help another being directly. It is only possible to make catalyst available in whatever form, the most important being the radiation of realization of oneness with the Creator from the Self, less important being information such as we share with you. We ourselves do not feel an urgency for this information to be widely disseminated. It is enough that we have made it available to 3, 4, or 5. This is extremely ample reward, for if one of these obtains fourth density understanding due to this catalyst, then we shall have fulfilled the law of one in distortion of service. We encourage a dispassionate attempt to share information without concern for numbers or quick growth among others. That your attempt to make this information available is, in your terms, your service. The attempt, if it reaches one, reaches all. We cannot offer shortcuts to enlightenment. Enlightenment is, of the moment, an opening to intelligent infinity. It can only be accomplished by the self, for the self. Another self cannot teach, learn enlightenment, but only teach, learn information, inspiration, or a sharing of love, of mystery, of the unknown, that makes the other self reach out and begin the seeking process that ends in a moment. But who can know when an entity will open the gate to the present? Question mark. Thank you. Can you tell me who was the entity before his incarnation on earth known as Jesus of Nazareth? I am wrong. I have difficulty with this question as it is phrased. Can you discover your form of this query? What I meant to say is, can you tell me if Jesus of Nazareth came from the Confederation before incarnation here? I am wrong. The one you know as Jesus of Nazareth did not have a name. This entity was a member of fifth density of the highest level of that sub-octave. This entity was desirous of entering this planetary sphere in order to share the love vibration in as pure a manner as possible. Thus, this entity received permission to perform this mission. This entity was then a wanderer of new name, of Confederation origins, of fifth density, representing the fifth density understanding of the vibration of understanding or love. Did you say the fifth vibration was that of love? I am wrong. I have made an error. The fourth density being is that which we intended to say, the highest level of fourth density going to fifth. This entity could have gone on to the fifth, but chose instead to return to the third for this particular mission. This entity was of the highest sub-octave vibration of love. This is speaking right into the microphone. Like right into it. Like I'm listening to my broadcast. And it's not exactly the loudest. Like I'm right here now. Like right at it. Let me see. Audio properties. 100%. Sync offset. Nope. Yeah, it should be about there. And if this is up all the way, let me try that. Maybe that's better. Try that. Maybe that's better. No? Okay. Try that. Try that. All right, one more time. One more time. Test. Test. It's not really doing anything. Not really. Hold on. Microphone boost. Test. Microphone boost. Test. So here. So here. Test, test. Test, test. Just not very loud. You know, it's plugged in and everything. Here, maybe? Maybe this is best? This is best. Maybe right. I have to be right next to it, like this. Maybe this is what it wants. Like right here. Right, I have to be right next to it. Like this. Maybe this is what it wants. Like right here. Hold on. Check. 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 See, it says it peaks, but I'm not seeing anything. Check. See, it says it peaks, but I'm not seeing anything. I'm not hearing anything either. Oh well. Alright, we'll just try and go from here. Not hearing anything either. Oh well. Alright, we'll just try and go from here. Alright, continuing on. I'm in there. The fourth density being going to the fifth entity. It could have gone. Alright, continuing on. The let's see. When I am communicating with you as Ra, are you at times individualized as the entity, or am I speaking to an entire social memory complex? You speak with Ra. There is no separation. You would call it social memory complex, thus indicating my manyness. To our understanding, you are speaking to an individualized portion of consciousness. Am I always speaking to the same individualized portion of consciousness in each session? I am Ra. You speak to the same entity through a channel or instrument. This instrument is at times lower in vital energy. This will sometimes hamper our proceedings. However, this instrument has a great deal of faithfulness to the task and gives whatever it has to this task. Therefore, we may continue even when energy is low. This is why we usually speak to the ending of the session due to our estimation of the instrument's levels of vital energy. Oh, okay. I would like to make a point clear now that I am sure of myself. The people of this planet, following any religion or no religion at all, or having no intellectual knowledge at all of the law of one, can still be harvested into the fourth density if they are of that vibration. Is that not correct? I'm wrong. This is correct. However, you will find few who are harvestable, whose radiance does not cause the others to be aware of their, what you may call, spirituality, the quality of the mind-body-spirit complex distortion. Thus, it is not particularly probable that an entity would be completely unknown to his immediate acquaintances as an unusually radiant personality. Even were this individual not caught up in any of the distortions of your so-called religious systems. When Jesus of Nazareth incarnated, was there an attempt by the Orion group to discredit him in some way? I am Ra. This is correct. Can you tell me what the Orion group did in order to try and cause his downfall? I am Ra. We may describe in general what occurred. This technique was that of building upon other negatively oriented information. This information had been given by the one whom your people called Yahweh. This information involved many strictures upon behavior and promised power of the third density service to self-nature. These two types of distortions were impressed upon those already oriented to think these thought forms. This eventually led to many challenges of the entity known as Jesus. It eventually led to one sound vibration complex, Judas, as you call this entity, who believed that it was doing the appropriate thing in bringing about or forcing upon the one you call Jesus the necessity for bringing in the third density planetary power distortion of the third density rule over others. This entity, Judas felt that if pushed into a corner, the entity you called Jesus would then be able to see the wisdom of using the power of intelligent infinity in order to rule others. The one you called Judas was mistaken in this estimation. intelligent infinity in order to rule others. The one you call Judas was mistaken in this estimation. Of the reaction of the entity Jesus, whose learning was not oriented towards the distortion. This results in the destruction of the bodily complex. Hold on a moment. Bodily complex of the one known as Jesus. Then, if the entity Jesus was fourth density and there are wanderers on this planet who came from fifth and sixth density, what was it that Jesus did that enabled him to be such a good healer, and could these fifth, sixth density beings here do now? Let's see. The same. I am Ra. Those who heal may be of any density which has the consciousness of the spirit. This includes third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. The third density can be one in which healing takes place just as the others. However, there is more illusory material to understand, to balance, to accept, and to move forward from. The gate to intelligent infinity can only be opened when an understanding of an in-streamings of intelligent energy are opened unto the healer. These are so-called natural laws of your local space-time continuum, and its web of electromagnetic sources of nexi, or in-streaming energy. Know, then, first the mind and body, then as the spirit is integrated and synthesized. These are harmonized into the mind-body-spirit complex, which can move along among the dimensions and can open the gateway to intelligent infinity, thus healing a self by light and sharing that light with others. True healing is simply the radiance of the self causing an environment in which a catalyst may occur, which initiates the recognition of self by self or self-healing properties of the self. How did Jesus learn this during this incarnation? The entity learned the ability by a natural kind of remembering at a very young age. Unfortunately, this entity first discovered his ability to penetrate intelligent infinity by becoming the distortion you call angry at a playmate. This entity was touched by the entity known as Jesus and was fatally wounded. Thus, the one known as Jesus became aware that there dwelt in him a terrible potential. This entity determined to discover how to use this energy for the good, not for the positive. This entity was extremely positively polarized and remembered more than most wanderers do. How did this aggressive action against a playmate affect Jesus and his spiritual growth? Where did he go after his physical death? I am Ra. The entity you called Jesus was galvanized by this experience and began a lifetime of seeking and searching. This entity studied first day and night in its own religious constructs, what you call Judaism, and was learned enough to be a rabbi, as you call teachers learners of this particular rhythm or distortion of understanding at a very young age. At the age of approximately 13 and one half of your years, this entity left the dwelling place of the earthly family, as you would call it, and walked to many other places seeking further information. This went on sporadically until the entity was approximately 25. At which time, returned to its family dwelling and learned and practiced the art of the earthly father. When the entity had become able to integrate and synthesize all experiences, the entity began to speak to other selves and learn what it had felt during the preceding years to be worthwhile nature. The entity was absolved karmically of the destruction of an other self when it was in the last portion of lifetime, and spoke upon what you would call a cross, saying, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." In forgiveness lies the stoppage of the wheel of action, or what you call karma. So interesting. He felt that the blood of proceeding was absolved karmically. Okay. That makes sense. What density is the entity known as Jesus in now? I am Ra. This information is harmless, though unimportant. Entity studies now the lessons of wisdom vibration, the fifth density, also called the light vibration. In our culture, there is a saying that he will return. Can you tell me if this is planned? I am Ra. I will attempt to sort out this question. It is difficult. This entity became aware that it was not an entity of itself, but operated as a messenger of the one creator, whom this entity saw as love. This entity was aware that this cycle was in its last portion, and spoke to the effect that those of this consciousness would return to the harvest. The particular mind-body-spirit complex you call Jesus is, as what you would call an entity, not to return except as a member of the Confederation speaking through a channel. However, there are others of the identical congruency of consciousness that will welcome those of the fourth density. This is the meaning of the returning. Can you tell me why you say the Earth will be fourth density positive instead of fourth density negative, since there seems to be much negativity here now? I am Ra. The Earth seems to be negative. That is due to the quiet, shall we say, horror, which is the common distortion which those good or positively oriented entities have towards the occurrences which are of your time-space present. However, those oriented and harvestable in the ways of service to others greatly outnumbers those whose orientations towards service to self has become that of harvestable quality. In other words, the questioner says, there will be fewer negative entities than positive entities harvested into the fourth density. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is correct. The great majority of your peoples will repeat third density. How did Taras Bulba, Genghis Khan, and Rasputin get harvested prior to the harvest? What? Oh, so in another... Okay. Harvest. Different one. I am Ra. It is the right privileged duty of those opening consciously the gate to intelligent infinity to choose the manner of their leaving of third density. Those of negative orientation who so achieve this right and duty must often choose to move forward in their learned teaching of service to self. Am I to understand that the harvest is to occur in the year 2011? Wrong. Or will it be spread out? I am Ra. This is approximation. We have stated we have a difficulty with your time-space. This is a appropriate, probable, possible time-space nexus for harvest. Those who are not in the carnation at this time will be included in the harvest. If an entity wants to be of service to others rather than of service to self while he is in the third density, are there best ways of being of service to others, or is any way just as good as any other way? I am Ra. The best way to be of service to others is to have been explicitly covered in previous material. We will reiterate briefly. The best way of service to others is the constant attempt to seek, to share the love of the Creator as it is known to the inner self. This involves self-knowledge and the ability to open the self to the other self without hesitation. Highlight that. And there we go. This involves, shall we say, radiating that which the essence of the heart of the mind-body-spirit complex, speaking to the intention of your question. The best way for each seeker in the third density is to be of service to others, is unique to that mind-body-spirit complex. This means that the mind-body-spirit complex must then seek within itself the intelligence of its own discernment as to the way it may best serve others. This will be different for each. There is no best. There is no generalization. Nothing is known. So the best way service is unique. So yes, each individual has their own unique way of expressing their best service to others. I don't wish to take up extra time asking questions over again. Some areas I consider important enough in relation to the law of one to ask questions in a different way in order to get another perspective on the answer. In the book, Oahspe, it states that if an entity goes over 51% service to others, and the less is 51% service to self, then that entity is harvestable. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is correct. If the harvesting is to be positive fourth dimensional level, what is the entity's percentage if he is to be harvested for the negative? The entity who wishes to pursue the path of service to self must attain a grade of 5, that is 5% service to others, 95% service to self. It must approach totality. The negative path is quite difficult to attain harvestability upon and requires great dedication. Why is the negative path so much difficult to attain harvestability upon than the positive? I am Ra. This is due to the distortion of the law of one, which indicates that the gateway to the intelligent infinity be a gateway at the end of a straight and narrow path, as you may call it. To attain 51% dedication to the welfare of others' selves is as difficult as attaining a grade of 5% dedication to others. Interesting. The the, shall we say, sinkhole of indifference is between those two. So he's saying that it is equally as hard to be 51% in dedication of service to others as it is to be 95% 95% dedication to yourself. Which I suppose makes sense. Because physical reality and wanting to preserve and survival and all of those things. Yeah, that makes sense to me. That makes sense. So, let's see here. Oh, I didn't realize this is not... There we go. Just a little bit further. Then, if an entity is harvested into the fourth density, with a grade of 51% for others and 49% for self, what level of fourth density would he go into? I'm assuming that there are different levels of the fourth density. I am Ra. This is correct. Each enters that subdensity, which vibrates in accordance with that entity's understanding. How many levels do we have here in the third density at this time? I am Ra. The third density has an infinite number of levels. I've heard that there are 7 astral and 7 devachanic levels. Is this correct? I am Ra. You speak of some of the more large distinctions and levels in your inner planes. This is correct. Who inhabits the astral and devachanic planes? I am Ra. Entities inhabit the various planes due to their vibration and nature. The astral planes vary from thought forms in the lower extremities to enlightened beings, who become dedicated to teach learning in higher astral planes. In the devachanic planes, as you call them, are those whose vibrations are even more close to the primal distortions of love light. Beyond those planes, there are others. Are there 7 subplanes to what we call our physical plane here? I am Ra. You are correct. This is difficult to understand. There are an infinite number of planes in your particular space-time continuum. Distortion. There are 7 subplanes of the mind-body-spirit complexes. You will discover the vibrational nature of these 7 planes as you pass through your experiential distortions, meeting other selves of the various levels which correspond to the energy influx centers of the physical vehicle. The invisible or inner third density planes are inhabited by those who are not of body complex natures such as yours. That is, they do not collect about their mind-spirit complexes as a chemical body. Nevertheless, these entities are divided into what you call an artificial dream within a dream into various levels. In the upper levels, desire to communicate knowledge back down to the outer planes of existence becomes less due to the intensive learned teaching which occurs upon these levels. Not sure I understood that. Okay. I think I got that. All right. It is necessary to penetrate one level at a time as we move through these planes. I am Ra. It has been our experience that some penetrate several planes at one time. Others penetrate them slowly. Some in eagerness attempt to penetrate the higher planes before penetrating the energies of the so-called more fundamental planes. This causes energy imbalance. Let's see. You will find it ill health, as you call this distortion, to frequently be the result of the subtle mismatch of energies, which some of the higher energy levels are being activated by the conscious attempts of the entity, while the entity has not penetrated the lower energy centers or subdensities of this density. Is there a best way to meditate? I am Ra. No. Simple, sweet, to the point. Oh, I realize now I'm out of frame because of my positioning of my picture here. Hold on. Yeah. Okay. Better. Is there a best way to meditate? No. Basically, no. At this time, near the end of the cycle, how are reincarnations in the physical allocated, shall we say, on this plane? I am Ra. Entities wishing to obtain critically needed experience in order to become harvestable are incarnated with priority over those who will, without too much probable possible doubt, need to re-experience this density. So, by this saying, If people want to be on this plane of existence, they are incarnated here with those needed to experience this, which has a potential to put them in one or the other camp. That's what I'm understanding. Not one that's pretty much already decided. How long has this type of allocation been going on? I am Ra. This has been going on since the first individual entity became conscious of its need to learn the lessons of this density. This was the beginning of what you may call a seniority by vibration. Can you explain what you mean by seniority by vibration? I am Ra. This will be the final question of this session of working. The seniority by vibration is the preferential treatment, shall we say, which follows the individuals. Each individual becoming aware of the time of harvest and the need of a self-love to bend mind, body, spirit towards the learned teaching of those lessons by giving them priority in order that an entity may have the best possible chance, shall we say, in succeeding in this attempt. May we ask at this time if there are any brief questions? My only question is what we can do to make the learners more comfortable, blah, 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 on appropriate apparel. Okay. We want to put heavier clothing on its feet. Is this correct? This is correct. Okay, great. Next, session 18. I am Ra. I greet you in the love and the light of the infinite creator. We communicate now. I was thinking last night, if we were to place of Ra right now, the first distortion of the law of one might cause me to mix some erroneous data. With this true information that I am transmitting to this group, do you come to this? I am Ra. We do not intentionally do this. However, there will be confusion. It is not our intent in this particular project to create erroneous information. But to express, in the confining ambiance of your language system, the feeling of infinite mystery of one creation in its infinite and intelligent unity. Thank you. I have a question that I will read. Much of the mystic tradition of seeking on earth holds that the belief that the individual self must be erased or obliterated, the material world ignored for the individual to reach nirvana, as it is called, or enlightenment. What is the proper role of the individual self in its worldly activities to aid an individual to grow more into the law of one? I am Ra. The proper role of the entity of this density to experience all things desired, to then analyze, understand, and accept these experiences, distilling from them the love light within them. Nothing shall be overcome. That which is not needed falls away. That seems important for meditation. Nothing needs to be overcome. Things just fall away. So this is like expressing the idea of willpower, and if you're operating on willpower, which works in with Scott Adams' idea of systems over goals, right? If you're trying to reach an exercise goal and you commit yourself to it through sheer willpower, you're trying to overcome a part of yourself. You're not trying to accept the part of yourself that is not getting you to that goal. What you're trying to do is overcome your own self. And through systems, you accept the part of yourself that doesn't like to work out, and you do it anyway. Like you're not trying to overcompensate for the amount of non-exercise that you have done, but you're trying to become an equilibrium of exercise. This is kind of rudimentary in the way I'm thinking about it, but that seems likely to me. Like if you want to overcome, you don't overcome problems. Things just fall away from your life that are no longer needed. Things come into your life that are needed, and things leave your life that are not. Pretty simple. Makes sense. The orientation develops due to the analysis of desire. Um, let's see. These desires become more and more distorted towards conscious application of love light as the entity furnishes itself with distilled experience. We have found it to be inappropriate to the extreme to encourage the overcoming of any desires, except to suggest the imagination rather than the carrying out in the physical plane, as you call it, of those desires not consonant with the level of the law of one, thus preserving the primal distortion of free will. The reason is unwise, here we go, to overcome is that overcoming is an unbalanced action, yes, creating difficulties in balancing the time-space continuum. See? That's pretty much exactly what I just said. You're creating an imbalance in yourself and your outside world and your reflections of what you are trying to achieve. You're not accepting, you're making imbalances to compensate. So, developing due to the analysis of desire. We found it inappropriate to encourage overcoming of any desires, except as just the imagination, rather than carrying out in the physical plane, as you call it, of those desires not constant with the law of one, thus preserving the primal distortion of free will. Primal distortion. Overcoming thus creates the further environment for holding on to that which apparently has been overcome. Interesting. All things are acceptable in the proper time for each entity, and in experiencing, in understanding, in accepting, in the sharing with other selves, the appropriate distortion shall be moving away from distortions of one kind to distortions of another, which may be more consonant with the law of one. In accepting and then sharing, the appropriate distortion shall be moving away, distortions of one kind. So, one distortion that leads you in a wrong way leads you to a correct way when you're not trying to distort yourself towards overcoming something and you're just trying to be, I suppose. I suppose that makes sense. All things are acceptable. It is, shall we say, a shortcut to simply ignore or overcome any desire. Ah, see? See? If this is true, then this is like God saying, ha, ha, do you think you can just muscle through it, huh? You think that's all it takes? Think that's all that life is, huh? You just keep on, you keep using that ego to try and get over my challenges. See how that works out for you. Basically, if it's designed, if it's intelligent design, then this is like God being like, yeah, that's just not the way it works. It's just not the way it actually works. Eventually, you're gonna run out of steam there, buddy. You need to just kind of accept it and move on. It must be instead be understood and accepted. Right. It's I didn't even read that yet. It's exactly right. This takes patience and experience, which can be analyzed with care, with compassion for self and for other self. Basically, I would say that to infringe upon the free will of another entity would be the basic thing never to do under the law of one. Can you state any other breaking of the law of one of this basic rule? I am wrong. As one proceeds from the primal distortion of free will, one proceeds to the understanding of the focal points of intelligent energy, which have created intelligences, or the ways of a particular mind-body-spirit complex in its environment. Both what you would call natural and what you would call man-made. Thus, the distortion to be avoided are those which do not take into consideration the distortions of the focus of energy, love, light, or shall we say, the logos of this particular sphere of density. These include the lack of understanding of the needs of the natural environment, the needs of other selves, mind, body, spirit complexes. These are many due to the various distortions of man-made complexes in which the intelligence awareness entities themselves have chosen a way of using the energies available. Thus, what we would do be an improper distortion with one entity is proper with another. We can suggest and attempt to become aware of the other self. as self, and thus do that action which is needed by other self. Understanding from the other self's intelligence and awareness. In many cases, this does not involve the breaking of the distortion of free will into the distortion or fragmentation called infringement. However, it is a delicate matter to be of service, compassion, sensitivity, and an ability to emphasize and are helpful in avoiding distortions of man-made intelligence awareness. So, we can suggest the attempt to become aware other self as a self. So these things are all good to avoid service to self. Compassion, sensitivity, ability to emphasize. The area or arena called the societal complex, in an arena in which these are no particular needs for care, for it is the prerogative, honor, duty of those in the particular planetary sphere to act according to their free will for the attempted aid of the social complex. Thus, you have two simple directives: awareness of the intelligent energy expressed in nature, awareness of the intelligent energy expressed in self, to be shared when it seems appropriate by the entity with the social complex, and you have one infinitely subtle and various set of distortions of which you may be aware. That is, the distortions with respect to self and other selves, not concerning free will, but concerning harmonious relationships and service to others as other selves would most benefit. As an entity in this density grows from childhood, he becomes more aware of his responsibilities. Is there an age below which an entity is not responsible for his actions, or is he responsible from the time of his birth? I am Ra. An entity incarnating upon Earth plane becomes conscious of self at a varying point in its time-space progress through the continuum. This may have a median, shall we say, of approximately 15 of your months. Some entities become conscious of self at a period closer to incarnation, some at a period farther from this event. In all cases, responsibility becomes retroactive from that point backward in the continuum, so that the distortions are to be understood by the entity and dissolved as the entity learns. Then an entity 4 years old would be totally responsible for any actions that were against or inharmonious with the law of one. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is correct. It may be noted that it has been arranged by your social complex structures that the newer entities to incarnation are to be provided with guides of a physical mind-body-spirit complex, thus being able to learn quickly what is the constant with the law of one. Who are these guides? I am Ra. These guides are what you call parents, teachers, and friends. You stated yesterday that the forgiveness is the eradicator of karma. I'm assuming that balanced forgiveness is the full eradication of karma, would require forgiveness not only for the other selves, but also for the forgiveness of self. Am I correct? I am Ra. You are correct. We will briefly expand upon this understand in order to clarify. Forgiveness of other self is forgiveness of self. An understanding of this insists upon full forgiveness upon the conscious level of self and other self, for they are one. A full forgiveness is thus impossible without the inclusion of self. Thank you. A most important point. Forgiveness of others, other self is forgiveness of self. That tracks. For they are one. Right. A full forgiveness is thus impossible without the inclusion of self. You mentioned that there were a number of confederations. Do all serve the infinite creator in basically the same way? Or do some specialize in some particular types of service? I am Ra. All serve one creator. There is nothing else to serve, for the creator is all there is. It is impossible not to serve the creator. There are simply various distortions of the service. As in the confederation, which works with your peoples, each confederation is a group of specialized individual social memory complexes, each doing that which expresses to bring into manifestation. Can you tell me how Yahweh communicated to Earth's people? This is a somewhat complex question. The first communication is what you would call generic. The second communication was the walking among your peoples to produce further genetic changes in consciousness. The third was a series of dialogues with chosen channels. Can you tell me what these genetic changes were and how they were brought about? I am Ra. Some of these genetic changes were in the form similar to what you call the cloning process. Thus, entities incarnated in the image of the Yahweh entities. The second was a contact of the nature you know as a sexual, changing the mind-body-spirit complex with the natural means of patterns of reproduction devised by the intelligent energy of your physical complex. Some genetic changes, cloning process. Second, sexual? Yahweh? What? Can you tell me specifically what they did in this case? We've answered this question. Please restate for further information. Can you tell me the difference between the sexual programming yes, and after intervention? This is a question which we can only answer by stating this intervention by genetic means is the same no matter what the source of this change. Can you tell me Yahweh's purpose in making the genetic sexual changes? Interesting. The purpose 75,000 years ago, as you measure time, was of one purpose only, that to express the mind-body complex, those characteristics, which would lead to the further and more speedy development of the spiritual complex. How these characteristics go about leading to a more spiritual development? The characteristics were encouraged included sensitivity of all physical senses to sharpen the experiences and the strengthening of the mind complex. In order to promote the ability to analyze these experiences. When did Yahweh act to perform the genetic changes? I am Ra. The Yahweh group worked with those of the planet you call Mars 75,000 years ago in what you would call the cloning process. There are differences, but they lie in the future of your time-space continuum, and we cannot break the free will of the law of confusion. The 2600 approximately time was the second time. We correct ourselves. 3600 approximately, the time of the attempts by those of the Orion group. During the cultural complex, a series of encounters in which the ones called Anak were impregnated with the new genetic coding of your physical complex organisms larger and stronger. Why did they want larger and stronger organisms? The ones of Yahweh were attempting to create and understand the law of one by creating mind-body complexes capable of grasping the law of one. The experiment was decided a failure from the view of the desired distortions, due to the fact that rather than assimilating the law of one, it was a great temptation to consider the so-called social complex or subcomplex elite different and better than other selves. This one of the techniques of service to self. And the Orion group produced this larger body complex to create an elite so that the law of one could be applied in what we call the negative sense. I am Ra. This is incorrect. The entities of Yahweh were responsible for the procedure in isolated cases, as experiments in combating the Orion group. However, the Orion group were able to use the distortion of mind-body complex to inculcate the thoughts of the elites rather than concentrations upon the learning teachings of oneness. Was Yahweh then of the Confederation? I am Ra. The Yahweh was of the Confederation, but was mistaken in its attempts to aid. Then Yahweh's communication did not help or create what Yahweh wished for them to create. Is this correct? I am Ra. The results of this interaction were quite mixed. Where the entities were a vibrational sum characteristic which embraced oneness, the manipulations of Yahweh were very useful. Wherein the entities of free will had chosen a less positively oriented configuration of some total vibratory complex, those of the Orion group were able for the first time to make serious inroads upon the consciousness of the planetary complex. Can you tell me specifically what allowed the most serious of these inroads to be made by the Orion group? I am Ra. This will be the final full question. Specifically, those who are strong, intelligent, have a temptation to feel different from those who are less intelligent and less strong. This is a distorted perception of oneness with other selves. It allowed the Orion group to form the concept of the Holy War, as you may call it. This is a seriously distorted perception. There were many of those wars of a destructive nature. Thank you very much. As you probably know, I will be working for the next 3 days, so we will possibly have another session tonight if you think it is possible. The next session after that would not be until 4 days from now. Do you believe that another session tonight is possible? The instrument is somewhat weak. This is a distortion caused by lack of vital energy. Thus, nurturing the instrument and physical balancing will allow another session. Do you understand? Not completely. What specifically shall we do for the physical balancing? Foodstuffs. Manipulate the physical complex to alleviate the distortion toward pain. Encourage certain amounts of what you would call exercise. The final injunction to take special care with alignments the entity may gain and aid in various symbols. We suggest you check these symbols most carefully. Entity is slightly misplaced from the proper configuration. Not important at this time. More important when the second session is to be scheduled. I leave you in the light of 1. Okay. Session 19. So this is later in the day. We are concerned with this communication with the evolution of mind, body, spirit. It seems to me that a good place to start would be the transition from the second and third density, then to investigate in detail the evolution of third density entities of Earth, paying particular attention to the mechanisms which help or hinder that evolution. Of course, let's see. Do all entities make a transition from second or third density, or are there some entities who have never gone through this transition? I am wrong. Your question presumes that the space-time continuum, understanding of the intelligent energy which animates your illusion. Within the context of this illusion, we may say that there are some that do not transfer from one particular density to another, for the continuum is infinite. In this understanding, which we have of the universe or creation as one infinite being, its heart of beating is as alive in its own intelligent energy. It merely is one beat of the heart of this intelligence from the creation to creation. In this context, each and every entity of consciousness will experience each and every density. Let's take the point at which an individualized entity of second density is ready for transition to third. Is this a second density being what we would call an animal? I am Ra. There are 3 types of second density entities which become, shall we say, inspirited. The first is the animal. This is the most predominant. The second is the vegetable, most especially that which you call sign vibration complex tree. These entities are capable of giving and receiving enough love to become individualized. The third is mineral. Occasionally, a certain location, place, as you call it, becomes energized to individuality through the love it receives and gives in a relationship to the third density enemy, which is in relationship to it. This is the least common transition. So, animal, vegetable, mineral. I don't know about that, but I suppose it makes sense. What about fruits? Do fruits count? Maybe not. When this transition from second to third density takes place, how does the entity, whether animal, vegetable, tree, or mineral, become inspirited? Entities do not become inspirited. They become aware of the intelligent energy within each portion, cell, atom as you call it, of its beingness. The awareness is that which is awareness of the already given. From the infinite come all densities. The self-awareness comes from within, given the catalyst of certain experiences, understanding, as we may call this particular energy, the upward spiraling of the cell or atom of consciousness. You may see then that there is the inevitable pull toward the what you may call eventual realization of self. Then, after the transition to the third density, am I correct in assuming, we'll take Earth as an example, the entities would then look like us? They would be in human form, is this correct? I am wrong. This is correct. Taking your planetary sphere as an example, when the first density entities become third density on this planet, was this within the help of the transfer of beings from Mars? Or were there second density beings who transferred into third density with no outside influence? I am Ra. There were some second density entities which made the graduation to the third density, with no outside stimulus, but only the efficient use of experience. Others of your planetary second density joined the vibration density cycle due to the harvesting efforts by the same sort of sending of vibratory aid as those of the Confederation send you now. This communication was, however, telepathic rather than telepathic vocal or telepathic written, due to the nature of the second density beings. Who sent the aid to the second density beings? I am Ra. We call ourselves the Confederation of Planets in service to the Infinite Creator. Simplification in order to use the difficulty of understanding among your people. We hesitate to use the term sound vibration, understanding it is closest to our meaning. Then did this second density to third density transition take place 75,000 years ago? Approximately. I am Ra. This is correct. Where did the second density beings get visible vehicles of third density type to incarnate into. I am Ra. There were among those upon the second density plane, those forms which were then exposed to third density vibrations became the third density, as you would call the sound vibration human entities. That is, there was loss of body hair, as you would call it, the clothing of the body to protect it, the changing of the structure of the neck, jaw, forehead, in order to allow the easier vocalization, and the larger cranial development characteristic of third density needs. This is normal transfiguration. Over how long a period was this transfiguration? Must have been very short. The assumption is correct, in our terms at least, within a generation and 1/2, as you know these things. Those who had been harvested of this planet were able to use the newly created physical complex of elements suitable for the third density lessons. Can you tell me how this newly created physical complex was suited to the third density lessons? What those lessons were? There is one necessity for third density. That necessity is self-awareness, or self-consciousness. In order to be capable of such, this chemical complex of body must be capable of abstract thought. Thus, the fundamental necessity is the combination of rational and intuitive thinking. This was transitory in the second density forms, operating largely upon intuition, which proved through practice to yield results. The third density mind was capable of processing information in such a way as to think abstractly and in what could be termed useless ways, in the sense of survival. This is the primary requisite. There are other important ingredients: the necessity for a weaker physical vehicle to encourage the use of the mind, the development of the already present awareness of the social complex. These are being necessary. The further development of your physical dexterity in the sense of the hand, as you call this portion of your body complex. This seems to be carefully planned or engineered stage of development. Can you tell me anything of the origin of this plan or its development? I am Ra. We go back to previous information. Consider and remember the discussion of the logos with the primal distortion of free will. Each galaxy developed its own logos. The logos has complete free will in determining the paths of intelligent energy, which promote the lessons of each of the densities given the conditions of the planetary spheres and the sun bodies. I will make a statement then of my understanding and ask you if I am correct. There is a, what I would call, physical catalyst operating at all times upon the entities in third density. I assume this operates approximately the same way in second density. It is a catalyst which acts through what we call pain and emotion. Is the primary reason for the weakening of the physical body and elimination of body hair, so that this catalyst would act more strongly upon the mind and therefore create the evolutionary process? I am Ra. This is not entirely correct, although closely associated with the distortions of our understanding. Consider, if you will, the tree, for instance. It is self-sufficient. Consider, if you will, the third density entity. It is self-sufficient only through difficulty and deprivation. It is difficult to learn alone, for there is a built-in handicap, at once the great virtue and great handicap of third density. That is the rational intuitive mind. Thus, the weakening of the physical vehicle, as you call it, was designed to distort entities towards a predisposition to deal with each other. This catalyst is shared between peoples of an important part of each self-developments, as well as the experiences of the self in solitude, and the synthesis of all experience through meditation. The quickest way to learn is to deal with other selves. To deal with other selves. This is a much greater catalyst than dealing with the self. Dealing with the self without other selves is akin to living without what you would call mirrors. Thus, the self cannot see the fruits of its beingness. Thus, each may aid each by reflection. This is also a primary reason for the weakening of the physical vehicle, as you call the physical complex. Then we have second density beings who have primarily motivation towards self and possibly a little motivation towards service to others, with respect to the immediate family going into third density and carrying the bias with them, but being in a position now where the bias will slowly be modified to one which is aimed toward a social complex, ultimately towards union with all. Am I correct? I am wrong. You are correct. Then the newest third density beings who have just made the transition from second are still strongly biased towards self-service. There must be many other mechanisms to create awareness of the possibility of service to others. I am wondering, first about the mechanism, I am wondering when the split takes place, where the entity is able to continue on the road to service to self that will eventually take him to the fourth density. I'm assuming that an entity can start, say, in second density with service to self, and continue right on through, just stay on what we would call the path of service to self and never be pulled over. Is this correct? I am wrong. This is incorrect. The second density concept of serving self includes serving of those associated with a tribe or pack. This is not seen in second density as separation of self and other self. All is seen as self, since in some forms of second density entities, if this tribe or pack becomes weakened, so does the entity within the tribe or pack. The new or initial third density has this innocent, shall we say, bias, or distortion towards viewing those in the family. A society, as you would call, perhaps, country as self, thus, though a distortion not helpful for progress in third density, it is without polarity. The break becomes apparent when the entity perceives others' selves as other selves, and consciously determines to manipulate other selves for the benefit of the self. This is the beginning of the road of which you speak. Then, through free will, sometime within the third density experience, the path splits and the entity consciously chooses, or he probably doesn't consciously choose. Does the entity consciously choose this path of initial splitting point? I am wrong. We speak in generalities, which is dangerous for always inaccurate. However, we realize you look for the overview, so we will eliminate anomalies and speak of majorities. The majority of third density beings is far along the chosen path before realization of that path is conscious. Interesting. Can you tell me what the bias creates momentum towards chosen path of service to self? We can speak only in metaphor. Some love the light, some love the darkness. It is a matter of the unique and infinitely various creator, choosing and playing among its experiences, as a child upon a picnic. Some enjoy the picnic and find the sun beautiful, the food delicious, the games refreshing, the glow with the joy of creation. Some find the night delicious, their picnic being pain, difficulty, sufferings of others, and the examination of perversities of natures. These enjoy a different picnic. All these experiences are available. It is the free will of each entity which chooses the form of play, the form of pleasure. I assume that an entity on either path can decide to change paths at any time and possibly retrace steps. The path changing being more difficult the further along the path the change is made. Is this correct? I'm wrong. This is incorrect. The further an entity has what you would call polarized, the more easily this entity may change polarity, for the more power and awareness the entity will have. Those truly helpless are those who have not consciously chosen, but who repeat patterns without knowledge of the repetition of the meaning of the pattern. Interesting. Those truly helpless are those who have not consciously chosen, but who repeat patterns without knowledge of repetition or meaning of the pattern. So, the people that are more asleep, shall we say, are the ones that are truly the most helpless. Where compared to an evil person who knows they do evil, has the greatest potential to switch to doing good? Is that what I'm to understand? Is that what he is saying? As well as someone who does good is most evilly swayed by being evil? Well, I suppose that makes sense. evil and good are subjective, but in darkness and light, we'll put it that way. Like if a senator or someone who seeks power is setting out to do good, and they're consciously aware of the good they're trying to do, they can be easily taken by the darkness because they can see the darkness as a path to achieving good. Where those who are dark can see the error of their ways and understand that their power relies not in causing misery, but in causing help and light. Where those who are unconscious of either decision, being light or darkness, continue on a path of unknowing and down the same path of disrespect to themselves, and I'm not disrespect, but just unconscious choosing, I suppose. Interesting. So those are the truly helpless ones, are those the ones who are asleep, which, there's people say, wake up, wake up. It's very, very cliche, but I believe we have a very important point here. It then seems that there is an extreme potential in this polarization, the same as there is in electricity. We have a positive and negative pole. The more you build the charge on either of these, the more the potential difference and the greater the ability to do work, as we call it in the physical. This would seem to me to be the same analogy which we have in consciousness. Is this correct? I am wrong. This is precisely correct. Then it would seem that there is a relationship between what we perceive as a physical phenomena, say the electrical phenomenon, and the phenomenon of consciousness, in that they, having stemmed from the one creator, are practically identical, but have different actions. Is this correct? I am wrong. Again, we oversimplify the answer to your query. The physical complex alone is created of many energy or electromagnetic fields interacting due to intelligent energy. The mental configurations or distortions of each complex, further adding fields of electromagnetic energy and distorting the physical complex patterns of energy. The spiritual aspect serving as a further complexity of fields, which is of itself perfect, but which can be realized in many distorted and unintegrated ways of the mind and body complexes of energy fields. Thus, instead of one, shall we say, magnet with one polarity, you have in the mind-body-spirit complex one basic polarity expressed in what you would call violet ray energy, the sum of the energy fields, but which is affected by thought of all kinds generated by the mind complex, by distortions of the body complex, and by the numerous relationships between the microcosm, which is the entity, and macrocosm, in many forms, which you may represent by viewing the stars, as you call them, each with a contributing energy ray, which enters the electromagnetic web of entity due to its individual distortions. This was a big word salad. Thoughts, the distortions, the complex, the numerous relationships. Viewing the stars. Is this then the root of what we call astrology? This will be the restful question of this session. This root of astrology, as you speak it, is one of the ways of perceiving the primal distortions which may be predicted along probability-possibility lines given, shall we say, cosmic orientations and configurations at the time of the entrance into the physical mental complex of the spirit, and at the time of the physical mental spiritual complex up into the illusion. This then has the possibility of suggesting basic areas of distortion. There is no more than this. The part astrology plays is likened unto that of one root among many. Is there anything that we can do to make the instrument more comfortable? I am wrong. The instrument is well aligned. You are being very conscientious. We request you take more care of being assured that this instrument is wearing footwear, what you would call it, complex shoes. Leaving the light of light, infinite creator. Wait. He said he was going to be gone for a few days. Did he actually leave, or February 8th? February 4th. Okay, so this was later. Okay, so I don't know if they actually ever did the night session. Probably never did. Okay, so 4 days later. Yep, alright. All right, session 20. I am Ra. I greet you in the love and light of the infinite creator. I communicate now. Let's see. To go back a bit, what happened to the second density entities who were unharvestable when the third density began? I assume that there were some that did not make it to the third density. I am Ra. A second density is able to repeat during third density a portion of its cycle. The second density entities who did not get harvested at the beginning of the 75,000 year period, some are still on this planet. Were any of these second density entities harvested into third density within the past 75,000 years? I am Ra. This has been increasingly true. So more and more second density entities are making it into the third density. Can you give me an example of second density entity coming to third density in the recent past? I am Ra. Perhaps the most common occurrence of the second density graduation during third density cycle is the so-called pet. For the animal which is exposed to the individualizing influences of the bond between animal and third density entity. This individualization causes a sharp rise in the potential of the second density entity, so that upon the cessation of physical complex, the mind-body complex does not return into the undifferentiated consciousness of that species, if you will. Then, can you give me an example of an entity in the third density that was just previously a second density entity? What type of entity do they become here? I am Ra. As a second density entity returns as third density for the beginning of this process of learning, the entity is equipped with the lowest consciousness. That is, equipped with self-consciousness. This would be a human in our form, then, who would be beginning the understanding of the third density. Is this correct? This is correct. Speaking of the rapid change that occurred in the physical vehicle from second to third density, in approximately a generation and a half, body hair was lost in structural changes. Physics of states, motion, or vibration. That all is motion vibration. If we correct to assume the bias of vibration in the physical world, thus creating Dewey B. Larson. Interesting. Never heard of this man. Let's find out who he is. Theoretician. Rational Wiki. Theory of everything presented as a proponent. Every physicist has ever said about reality. Pseudoscience. Oh, well, I should probably blow this up, bring this up. What? Hold on a second. Dewey B. Larson. The Larson Research Center. Let's try a Wikipedia. Interesting. Okay. Reciprocal fistula theory. Uh-huh. The ideas are promoted as members of the International Society of United Science. Always deemed feasible, a reciprocal system of physical theory proposed. Critics, which include much of the mainstream, RST be pseudoscience, charging that it is untestable. got misguided, was fallen on deaf ears. Right. Mathematical complexity and complex theory, but a prominent physicist and mathematician has gone to great lengths to prove, though. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So he's an alternative theorist. Alternative theorist of the universe. Alright, interesting. The physics sound vibrational Dewey is a correct system as far as it's able to go. There are those things which are not included in the system, however. Those coming after this particular entity using the basic concept of vibration and study of vibrational distortions will begin to understand that which you know as gravity and those things you consider as in dimensions. These things are necessary to be included in a more universal, shall we say, physical theory. Did this entity then bring the material through for use of primary and fourth density? I am wrong. This is correct. Yesterday, we were talking about the split that occurs when an entity either consciously or unconsciously chooses a path that leads to either service others or service to self. The physical question, the philosophical question of why such a split even exists came up. It was my impression that just as it is in electricity, if we have no polarity in electricity, we have no electricity. We have no action. Therefore, I'm assuming that it is in the same consciousness. If we have no polarity in the consciousness, we also have no action or experience. Is this correct? If we have no polarity, we have no electricity. We have no action. Therefore, I'm assuming, so if you're not either in service to others or service to self, then you are not conscious in either sense? That's interesting. You may use the term work. Then the concept of service to self and service to others is mandatory if we wish to have work, whether it be work in consciousness or work of a mechanical nature in the Newtonian concept in the physical. Is this correct? I am wrong. This is correct with one addendum. The coil, as you may understand this term, is wound, is potential, is ready. The thing that is missing without polarizing is the charge. Then the charge is provided by individualized consciousness. Is this correct? The charge is provided by the individualized entity using the inpourings and instreamings of energy by the choices of free will. Thank you. As soon as the third density started 75,000 years ago, and we have incarnate third density entities, what was the average human lifespan at this time? I am wrong. At the beginning of this particular portion of your space-time continuum, the average lifespan was approximately 900 of your years. Did the average lifespan grow longer or shorter as we progress into third density experience? There is a particular use for a span of life in this density, and given the harmonious development of learning teachings in this density, the lifespan of the physical complex would remain the same throughout the cycle. However, your particular planetary sphere developed vibrations by the second major cycle, which shortened the lifespan dramatically. Assuming a major span is 25,000 years, at the end of the first major cycle, what was the lifespan? The lifespan at the end of the first cycle, which you call major, was approximately 700 of your years. Then in 25,000 years, we lost 200 years of lifespan. Is this correct? This is correct. Can you tell me the reason for the shortening? The causes of the shortening are always in euphonious or in harmonious relational vibration between ourselves. In the first cycle, this was not severe due to the dispersion of peoples, but there was the growing feeling complex distortion towards separateness from other selves. I'm assuming that at the start of one of these cycles, there could have either been a positive polarization that would generally occur over the 25,000 years, or a negative polarization. Is the reason for the negative polarization and the shortening of the lifespan the influx of entities from Mars who had already polarized somewhat negatively? This is incorrect. There was not a strong polarization due to this influx. The lessening of the lifespan was due primarily to the lack of building a positive orientation. When there is no progress, those conditions which grant progress are gradually lost. This is one of the difficulties of remaining unpolarized. Of course. The chances, shall we say, of progress become steadily less. The way I understand it, at the beginning of the 75,000-year cycle, then, we had a mixture of entities, those who had graduated from second density on Earth to become third density, and then a group of entities transferred from the planet Mars to continue third density here. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is correct. You must remember that those transferred to the sphere were in the middle of their third density, so that this third density was an adaptation rather than a beginning. What percentage of entities third density were Martian, and what percentage harvested from Earth's second density? I am wrong. There were perhaps 1/2 of the third density population from the red planet Mars, as you call it. Perhaps 1/4 from the second density of your planetary sphere. Approximately 1/4 from other sources. Other planetary spheres whose entity chose the planetary sphere for third density work. When they incarnated here, did all these types mix together in societies or groups, or were they separated by groups in society? They remain largely unmixed. Then did this unmixing lead to a potential possibility of warlike energy between groups? I am Ra, this is correct. Did this help to reduce the lifespan? I am Ra, this did reduce the lifespan, as you call it. Can you tell me why 900 years is the optimum lifespan? The mind-body-spirit complex of third density has perhaps 100 times the intensive program of catalytic action from which to distill distortions and learn teachings than any other of the densities. Thus, the learned teachings are the most confusing to the mind-body-spirit complex, which is, shall we say, inundated by the ocean of experience. During the first, shall we say, perhaps 150 to 200 of your years, as you measure time, the human is going through the complex of spiritual childhood. The mind and the body are not enough to discipline configuration to lend clarity to the spiritual influxes. Thus, the remaining time span is given to optimize understandings from which that experience itself. And at present, it would seem that our current lifespan is much too short for those who are new to third density lessons. Is this correct? I am wrong. This is correct. Those entities which have, in some way, taught themselves the appropriate distortion for rapid growth can now work within the confines of the shorter lifespan. However, the greater preponderance of your entities find themselves in what may be considered a perpetual childhood. Back in the first 25,000-year period, or major cycle, what type of aid was given by the Confederation entities who were in the 25,000-year period so that they would have the opportunity to grow? Let's see. I am Ra. The Confederation members, which dwell in the inner plane existence within the planetary complex of vibratory densities, worked within these entities. There was also the aid of one of the Confederation, which worked with those of Mars in making the transition. For the most part, participation was limited, as it was appropriate to allow the full travel of the workings of the confusion mechanism to operate in order for the planetary entities to develop that which they wished in, shall we say, freedom within their own thinking. It is often the case that a third density planetary cycle will take place in such a way that there need be no outside, shall we say, or other self-aid in the form of information. Rather, the entities themselves are able to work themselves toward the appropriate polarizations and goals of third density learned teachings. I make the assumption that if the maximum efficiency had been achieved in this 25,000-year period, the entities would have polarized either towards service to self or towards service to others, one or the other. This would have made them harvestable at the end of that 25,000-year period, in which case they would have had to move to another planet because this one would have been a third density for 50,000 more years. Is this correct? I am Ra. Let us untangle your assumption, which is complex and correct in part. The original desire is that entities seek to become one. If entities can do this in a moment, they may go forward in a moment, and thus we're able And thus, were this to occur to a major cycle, indeed, third entity, third density development throughout the one infinite universe, there may be a small harvest after the first cycle, the remainder having significantly polarized the second density. Where did I go? First cycle. The second cycle having a much larger harvest, the remainder being significantly polarized. The third cycle, culminating process, harvesting being completed. Was the Confederation watching to see and expecting to see a harvest at the end of the 25,000 year period, in which a percentage would be harvestable fourth density positive and a percentage harvestable fourth density negative? This is correct. You may see our role in the first major cycle as that of the gardener, who, knowing the season, is content to wait for the spring. When the springtime does not occur, the seeds do not sprout. Then it is the gardener who must work in the garden. Am I to understand, then, that there was neither a harvest or positive or negative entities in the 25,000 years? That is correct. Those whom you call the Orion Group made one attempt to offer information to those of the third density during that cycle. However, the information did not fall upon the ears of any who were concerned to follow this path to polarity. What technique did the Orion Group use to give this information? The technique used was two kinds. 1. The thought transfer of what you might call telepathy. 2. The arrangement of certain stones in order to suggest strong influences of power, this being those of statues and of rock formations in your Pacific areas, as you call them, and to an extent in your Central American regions, as you call them. The technique used was 1. The thought transfer, telepathy. I see. Were you speaking in part of the Stoneheads of Easter Island? Imra, this is correct. How would such Stoneheads influence people to take the path of service to self? Imra, picture, if you will. Oh, this will be good. The entities living in such a way that their mind-body-spirit complex are what seems to be the mercy of forces which they cannot control. Given a charged entity, such a statue or a rock formation, charged with nothing but power, it is possible for the free will of those viewing this particular structure or formation to ascribe to this power over those things which cannot be controlled. This, then, has the potential for the further distortion to power over others. How are these stoneheads constructed? They were constructed by thought, after a scanning of the deep mind, the trunk of the mind tree, looking at the images most likely to cause the experience of awe to the viewer. Did the Orion entities do this themselves? Did they do this in the physical? Did they land, or did they do it from mental planes? I am Ra. Nearly all these structures and formations were constructed, but at distance, by thought. Let's see. By thought. And, a very few were created in the later times in imitation of the original constructs by entities upon your Earth plane density. What density Orion entity did the construction of these heads? I am Ra. The fourth density, the density of love or understanding, was the density of the particular entity which offered this possibility to those of your first major cycle. You use the nomenclature of the fourth density, negative, as for the fourth density, positive. Both are called the dimension of love or understanding. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is correct. Let's see. I am Ra. This is correct. Approximately 60,000 of your years in the past, time-space continuum. What structures were built in South America? I am Ra. This is in this location where fashioned the character statues, some formation which you call rock, and some formation involving rock and earth. Were lines at Nazca included in this? That is correct. Since these can only be seen from an altitude, of what benefit were they? I am Ra. The formations were of benefit because charged with energy of power. I'm a little confused. These lines at Nazca are hardly understandable for any entity walking on the surface. He cannot see anything but disruption of the surface. However, if you go to a high altitude, you can see the patterns. How was it a benefit to the entities walking on the surface? I am Ra. At the remove of the amount of time-space which is now your present, it is difficult to perceive that at the time-space of 60,000 years ago, the Earth was formed in such a way as to be visibly arranged in powerful structural designs, from the vantage point of the distant hills. In other words, at that time, there were hills overlooking these lines. I am Ra. This will be the last full question of the session. The entire smoothness, as you see this area now, was built up many places and hills. The time-space continuum has proceeded with wind and weather, as you would say, to erode, to a great extent, both the formidable structures of Earth designed at the time and the nature of the surrounding countryside. I think I understand, then, that these lines are just the faint traces of what used to be there. I am Ra. This is correct. Thank you. We need to know whether there's anything to continue with another session, anything we could do. Observe carefully the alignment. I turn to the next session to focus upon the development of the positive-oriented identities of the first 25,000 years. I know you can't make suggestions. Can you give any comment at all? The choices are yours according to your discernment. Okay, so there we are. There we are. How much more? So 21, 22, 23, 24. Let's see, it's at the end here. It's 26. So there's 26 sessions. Go back to 20, I think we were at. 21, I think, is where we would be leaving. Or starting again. Yeah. So how many pages? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, we could do that. We can get that. We can get that done. I think we'll probably end after that. But in the meantime, I am Ra. I greet you in the love and light of the infinite creator. Communicate now. I have a couple of questions that I don't want to forget to ask in this period, so I'll ask them first. The first question is, would the future content of this book be affected, if in any way, if the instrument reads the material that we have already obtained? I am Ra. The future as you measure in time-space communications which we offer thoughts this instrument have no connection with the instrument's mind complex. This is due to two first things. The fidelity of the instrument is dedicating its will to service of the infinite creator. Secondly, the distortion understanding of our social memory complex that the most efficient way to communicate material with as little distortion as possible. Given the necessity of the use of the sound vibration complexes, is to remove the conscious mind complex from the spirit complex so that we communicate without reference to any instrument orientation. Do you use the instrument's vocabulary or your own vocabulary to communicate with us? We use a vocabulary of the language with which you are familiar. This is not the instrument's vocabulary. However, this particular mind-body-spirit complex retains the use of a sufficiently large number of complexes that this distinction is often without any importance. So at the start of the 75,000 year cycle, we know that the quarantine was fully set up. I'm assuming then that the Guardians were aware of the infringement on the free will that would occur if they didn't set this up at the time and therefore did it. Is this correct? This is partially incorrect. The incorrectness is as follows. Those entities whose third density experience upon the Thread Planet was brought to as prematurely were aided genetically while being transferred to this third density. This, although done in the desire to aid, was seen as infringement upon free will. The light quarantine, which consists of the Guardians, or Gardeners as you may call them, which would have been in effect, was intensified. When the 75,000 year cycle started, the lifespan was approximately 900 years ago, average. What was the process and scheduling mechanism, shall I say, of reincarnation at that time? And how did the time in between incarnations into third density physical apply to the growth of the mind-body-spirit complex? This query is more complex than most. We shall begin. What was the process? So, he's asking about life cycles? Okay. begins in darkness, as you think or consider of your density as one. Asleep and forgetting. This is only the plane of forgetting is necessary for the third density entity to forget, so that the mechanism of confusion of free will may operate upon the newly individualized consciousness complex. Thus, the beginning entity is one of all innocence, oriented towards animalistic behavior, using other selves only as extension of self for the preservation of all self. The entity becomes slowly aware that it has needs, shall we say, that are not animalistic. That is, that are useless for survival. These needs include the need for companionship, the need for laughter, the need for beauty, the need to know the universe about it. These are the beginning needs. All innocence oriented towards animalistic behaviors, using other selves that it has needs. Incarnations begin to accumulate. Interesting. As the incarnation begins to accumulate, other needs are discovered. The need to trade, the need to love, the need to be loved, the need to elevate animalistic behaviors to a more universal perspective. During the first portion of the third density cycle, incarnations are automatic and occur rapidly upon the cessation of energy complex of the physical vehicle. There is small need to review or heal experiences of the incarnation, as what you would call energy centers begin to be activated to a higher extent. More of the content of experience during the incarnation deals with the lessons of love. Thus, the time, you may understand it, between incarnations is lengthened to give appropriate attention to the review and healing of experiences of the previous incarnation. At some point in third density, the green ray energy center becomes activated, and at that point, incarnation ceases to be automatic. When incarnation ceases to be automatic, I am assuming that the entity can decide when he needs to incarnate for the benefit of his own learning. Does he also select his parents? This is correct. Interesting. Interesting. Assuming that the entity can decide. The time in our cycle, near the end, what percentage of entities incarnating are making their own choices? The approximate percentage is 54%. It's not very high, is it? Thank you. During the 50 to 25,000 year cycle, were there any terrestrial development at all, machinery available to people? Using the term machine to the meaning which you ascribe, the answer is no. However, there were, shall we say, various implements of wood and rock which were used in order to obtain food for use in aggression. At the end of the first 25,000 year cycle, were there any physical change that occurred rapidly, like that which occurs at the end of the 75,000 year cycle? Or is this just an indexing time for the harvesting period? At the end of the first 25,000 year cycle, was there any... I am wrong. There was no change, except that which, according to intelligent energy, or what you may term physical evolution, suited physical complexes into their environment, thus being the color of the skin due to the area of the sphere upon which entities lived, the gradual growth of people due to improved intake of foodstuffs. Then, at the end of the 25,000 year period, I am guessing that the Guardians discovered that there was no harvest of either positively or negative-oriented entities. Then tell me what happened. What action was taken? I am wrong. There was no action taken except to remain aware of the possibility of calling for help or understanding among entities of this density. The Confederation is concerned with the preservation of the conditions conducive to learning. This, for the most part, revolves around the primal distortion of free will. Then the Confederation gardeners did nothing until some sort of plants in their garden called them for help. Is this correct? This is correct. When did the first call occur, and how did it occur? The first calling was approximately 46,000 of your years ago. The calling was those of Maldek. The entities were aware of their need for rectifying the consequences of their action, and were in some confusion in the incarnate state of the circumstances of their incarnation. The unconscious being aware, the conscious being quite confused. This created a calling. The Confederation sent love and light to these entities. How the Confederation sent this love and light? What did they do? There dwell within the Confederation planetary entities whose from their planetary spheres do nothing but send love and light as pure streamings to those who call. This is not in the form of conceptual thought, but as pure and undifferentiated love. Did the first distortion of Law of One then require that equal time, shall I say, be given to the self-service oriented group? I am Ra. In this case, this was not necessary for some of your time due to the orientation of the entities. What was their orientation? The orientation of these entities was such that the aid of the Confederation was not perceived. Since it was not perceived, it was not necessary to balance this. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is correct. What is necessary to balance is opportunity. When there is ignorance, there is no opportunity. When there exists a potential, there exists opportunity such shall be balanced. Thus balancing caused by not only the positive and negative orientations of those offering aid, but also the orientation of those requesting aid. Thank you very much. I apologize for being so stupid in stating my questions, but this has cleared up my understanding nicely. Then, in the second 25,000 year cycle, was there any great civilization that developed? I am Ra. In the sense of greatest of technology, there were no great societies during the cycle. There were some advancement among those of Deneb, who had chosen to incarnate as a body in what you would call China. There were appropriately positive steps in activating the green ray energy complex in many portions of your planetary sphere, including the Americas. The continent, which you call Africa, the island, which you call Australia, and that which you call India, as well as various scattered peoples. None of these became what you would name great, as the greatness of Lemuria or Atlantis is known to you due to the formation of strong social complexes. In the case of Atlantis, a very great technological understandings. However, in South American area of your planetary sphere, as you know it, there grew to be a great vibratory distortion toward love. The entities were harvestable at the end of the second major cycle without ever having the form social strong technological complexes. This will be the final question. Is there a query we may answer quickly before we close? I'd like to apologize for the confusion on my part carrying on the second of 25,000 years. I would like to ask if there's anything we can do to make the instrument more comfortable. I'd like to have a second session. You may observe the slight misalignment, of course. As well to have a second session. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Alright, we're not going to do that. We're going to leave off here. We're going to leave off here. I think 12 o'clock is pretty good. 2 hours of reading. It's not bad at all. Thank you those of us who have joined and have watched and enjoyed the stream. I thank you for joining me and watching on this wonderful day. If you'd like, you may follow me over at Tallglass10 on Twitter or X, and you can also follow me on YouTube and Rumble at The Human Advocate. I'm going to keep trying to work on these sound things, and hopefully I'll get that oriented in a better way. But if you like, you can follow me on any of those social medias. Follow me here, and thank you all very much for watching and enjoying the reading of the Law of One. So next time I think we'll probably get 2 or 3 more chapters in. We might maybe finish the book if we have enough time. But with that being said, let's go over to full screen here real quick. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching with me and enjoying and reading. And have a wonderful day. Semper Sursum. Excelsior. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.